So how old were you on 9/11?
I was 24 years old.
Where were you living at the time?
I was living on the Lower East Side in Stuyvesant Town, where actually your grandparents first lived when they were first married.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Was that just by chance, or like?
Well, I had known about that place, that area of town, because Manny used to talk about it all the time.
Yeah.
But that was where I decided to move after I moved back from San Francisco.
Whatever. You live in San
Yeah.
Francisco.
Yeah.
Okay, so what was your life like at the time?
So I was a young professional
Right.
in New York City. I, had some extra cash floating around. So I had a lot of friends in the city. We would, go out to dinner, go shopping. I loved shoes. I still do. So life was good. Went to the gym, saw my friends, went to work. Like it was a nice life.
Yeah. What was your job?
My job, I was a junior sales broker for an institutional sales company, so for like a stock company.
And where was that office located?
That office was located at One World Financial Center, which is downtown in the financial district in New York City.
So what was that proximity to the World Trade Center?
The proximity to the World Trade Center was directly across the street. So if you were to stand like walking into my office building, like you would have to like really like crane your neck to look up at the World Trade Centers.
Wow.
Yeah,
So do you remember your morning on September 11th?
I do.
What was that morning?
Yes. So I had actually stayed in Hoboken because I had a friend that went to Boston College with me who lived in Hoboken, and we had a plan to go to dinner the night before, and so we went to dinner in Hoboken, and then I just stayed at her apartment. And so my commute was different
Right.
on September 11th than it normally was. I took the ferry across from Hoboken to World Financial Center because that's where there were ferry docks there too.
Yeah.
And so I decided to take the ferry across because I thought it would be kind of fun. It was a beautiful day. It was sunny.
Yeah.
The weather was warm. I had never really commuted like that before. So I took the ferry across. And then I just went to work from there.
So then you were just at work
Yes.
and going about your normal.
Yes, going about my normal day. Typically in the morning time, we would get ready for the research analysts to come on, and they would give us like a briefing of the stocks and how things were going and the things that we should be talking to clients about that day. The stock market opens at 9:30, so typically you would get in and you would prepare your day and get ready for your list of clients you were going to call. So I was doing a normal day that way.
Right. So then when the first tower was hit, what was like the
So
what do you think was
I
happening?
I believe I was on the phone when the first tower hit, when the first plane hit, and we didn't know what it was. My initial reaction was that it was a truck.
Yeah.
Like it just felt like a boom, boom, boom of a truck. And we really didn't, think too much of it. And then I was talking actually to somebody who was in Connecticut. I was on the phone with someone in Connecticut, and that person actually said they think that a small Cessna, like a small private
Yeah.
jet, had flown into one of the towers by accident. Like that was what was being told to me.
So what about the second tower?
So then
well, in between, what was happening?
yeah, so then in between, there was a lot of chaos. Like people started to be like, the word started traveling. When you work in a Wall Street firm, like information comes to you very, very quickly.
Yeah.
So I had been on the phone with this person in Connecticut, and they were like, wait a minute, like they're showing, like that someone had, gotten some footage already, and they're showing what it was, and they realized like it was, a plane that flew directly into it. And then the second one hit. I had been on the phone actually with your grandmother.
Oh, really?
With Annie, yeah. And the second one had hit, And I remember going to like the window because my desk was like right across from like the window to where I was sitting was like right across the street from the World Trade Center. And I remember I had to like go over it, and to see it, I had to like go like all the way and like look way up to see it. And it was very surreal. It was very surreal. There were like papers floating through the sky, and there was a huge plume of smoke, and they were making an announcement in my office building that, you know, it was a World Trade Center issue and we should remain in the building.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And the sales people that I worked with at the time were people that were like probably contemporaries to like your dad or Uncle Brian.
Yeah.
And the one guy, because I was young, I was like 24, I felt sort of like a little sister to them in a lot of ways. And the one guy, they called me Fitz, because, you know, our last name. And the one guy was like, Fitzy, like, get your stuff, we're leaving. Like, we're going. And I was like, okay. And I like centered myself for a minute, and I was like, okay, get my purse. I got my purse, and everyone started filing out.
So then, what did you do next after that?
So then, I had to, you know, right before that, I had to get off the phone with my mother, and she did not want to get off the phone.
Yeah.
And Nanny was like, you know, no, like, stay on the phone. I was like, Mom, I have to leave.
Yeah.
And so then there were cell phones, but they weren't great.
Yeah.
And the cell phone towers, like, you couldn't reach anybody. So I was just kind of going. And we all filed down the stairs. It was actually quite orderly. And I had decided when I got to the street level, the sheer terror and panic that was on people's faces was just like nothing I had ever seen. And people were just comatose, standing there looking at it, like looking up. And so I had made that decision when I got to the street level that I wasn't going to look. I don't know why. I just thought to myself, I have to put number one, I have to take care of myself, and I have to get out. And so I decided not to look, and I got the idea to go back to the water because I had remembered I took the ferry. And so I went back and I walked like with masses and masses of people, and I got on a boat, I got on a ferry, and I went back to Hoboken. And yeah, it was wild.
So you were able to get back?
Yes, I was able to get back before the towers fell.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Thankfully.
And I ran into this guy that also worked in my office with me, and you know, there were just mobs of people, and his parents lived in Spring Lake, and he was like, I'm driving down the shore, do you want to ride? And I said, yes, please bring me home to my parents.
Wow.
Yeah.
So was there anything that you saw that was like really jarring? Like,
yes. There were a lot of things. Do you really know? I mean, yeah, it was not, it was
if you feel comfortable.
Yeah, I mean, I think some of it was like pretty traumatic, like to think back on it.
Yeah.
You know, it's like just what happens to human beings in that type of tragedy. You know, like I'm typically a person that would like run to help. And I had been talking to someone just before that was like, don't try to go and help. Like, this is not a time for you to go and help. Yeah. And it was very hard for me because when I see somebody in need, like my desire is to help. And so, yeah, I mean, it was very scary, like some of the things that we saw, you know, certainly like a gaping hole in two of the most massive and revered buildings in the world. You know, and just seeing the fire, you know, your brain is like, how are these people all going to get out? You know, like, what's going to happen? So it was scary. There was some unfortunate things that I did see, you know, that were just sad situations of people that were scared. But fortunately, I was off of the island before the towers fell down. If there's any fortunate part of it, the whole thing was such a tragedy. If there's anything good for me, is that I was
able to get out.
Yeah, I was off.
So then, after this, when was like the next time that you came back to the city and came back to your job? Like, how was
Yeah.
that after process?
That's a really good question, actually, because I ended up staying at my parents, at your grandparents' house for several weeks. I did not go back to the city. And at the time, because of, working at a Wall Street firm, like their infrastructure is so strong
Yeah.
that they were able to really, connect with everybody. We had something back then called a BlackBerry. I don't know if you know that.
Yeah, I know.
So we had a BlackBerry, and so you could get your emails, and we would have conference calls, from everyone was from home.
Mhm.
We were just staying at home.
The original work.
The
from
original
home.
work from home for a terrible reason. Yeah.
So
we didn't go back to the city. Gosh, I want to think maybe 2 or 3 weeks. It might have been 3 weeks. I had to go and buy new clothes.
yeah.
It was wild.
So
And then when we went back, we went to they found another office space for us, in Midtown, very far away from. No one could get down to where the trade centers were.
yeah. So were your offices
Yes,
completely
destroyed.
right?
Yeah. So the glass. I mean, I didn't. We eventually got to go back to the building, and they, miraculously had collected the things from our desks. We sat in long
Yeah.
desks, and they collected the stuff from your desk and put it in a box. And so we had to go back to the building and identify our things.
Mm-hmm.
And we went up to the 30th floor, and they had a huge conference room that was open, and you had to go and find your stuff in a box.
So how
Very
did this change your life in the city afterward? Did you consider just leave? Were you how did you feel?
Yeah.
Coming back into
I
the
had a
island?
very, very difficult time in the city. I felt I've since read in my job that I do now that your olfactory glands, your smell, your sense of smell is a big trigger to memories that you have.
Yeah.
And so for me, there was this smell in the city that was very, very strong, and that was a big thing. I could smell it everywhere, and I was very afraid to go underground
Mm-hmm.
in the subway. So I think for months I would only take taxis or the
Yeah.
bus. I had a very strong fear of being underground and not being able to get out.
Mm.
So that was probably trauma. I'm
Yeah,
sure.
definitely.
Yeah. And then I did really think about what kind of work I was doing,
Mm-hmm.
and is this really the career path for me? I've been sort of on the fence, and I really loved talking to the people when I worked on Wall Street, but
Yeah.
I wasn't really finance minded.
Mm-hmm.
So it sort of started to solidify some of my decision to go back to graduate school.
Yeah. So do you think that impacted you and your
I
career
think so.
path now?
I think so, yeah. I think that pure desire to want to help,
Mhm.
but deciding to take care of myself, which I thought was much more important at the time. And then just that coupled with sort of I really enjoyed talking to people and finding out about their lives, and it made me a good salesperson in some senses because I made a rapport with people.
Yeah.
But it was just working on a different product. I didn't want to sell things. I wanted to
Yeah.
sort of help people. So then I decided to go back to graduate school eventually.
Do you want to just quickly share what you do now?
Oh, yes. So now I am a licensed clinical social worker. So I went back to, first I worked in a nonprofit for about 5 to 8 years in Jersey City helping homeless women and children. And then I went back to graduate school at NYU and I got a master's in social work. And then after that you have to sit for 2 licensing exams and do 3,000 clinical hours. So I did all of that. I worked in a crisis unit, and then I most recently, for the past 10 years, I've been working in public education as a counselor, and I have a private practice where I see kids and adolescents, teens, adults in mental health care.
Which is where we are right now.
Which is where we are right now, at Turning Tides Wellness Center.
Little plug. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Oh, also I just have a quick, a curiosity question.
Yes.
My dad was talking about the story about the kid with the red bandana who you
Yes.
said went to BC.
Yes. So this is a very interesting story. So the kid with the red bandana went to BC
Mhm.
and he played lacrosse. His name is Wells Crowther.
Yeah.
And I had been on an E-train, which went right into the World Trade Center. Like that's where the subway station was.
Mhm.
And the E-train went uptown, downtown. And so for some reason I was on the E-train and I was standing there one morning and I saw Wells. And we had this exchange, and I was like, "Hey, like, how you doing?" I played field hockey at BC.
Yeah.
He played lacrosse at BC. He was a little bit younger than I, and I was like, "Oh, how you doing?" Blah 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 blah. And he gave me his business card, and he's like, "I'm working in the trade centers," and I was like, "Oh my god, like that's amazing! Like, wow, like good for you. That must be so cool to be working in that building." So I had that exchange with him. I never really bumped into him. We weren't really friends. Like we kind of just knew each other
Yeah.
casually. And then when I went back to pick up my things, his business card was one of the things that was in my
No
little
way.
box that they had found from my desk.
Oh my gosh.
And so I wrote his parents a letter and I mailed back his business card to his parents because I thought that they might like to have that.
Oh my god.
Yeah, and then I found out that he was the man with the red bandana. Yeah, yep, it was him, and he saved so many people. He always carried a bandana in his
Yeah.
back pocket, and he did it like at BC too. I think the story goes,
Mhm.
and he was a person who stayed, who was there
Yeah.
and helped, and saw that was what he felt drawn to do in that moment. So he's a real hero. He was a real hero. So I had a little glimpse of his life, and we had a nice exchange. And I think about him every single year. And BC does a lot now to honor him, which I think is great.
Yeah.
So, yeah, in the lacrosse world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my god. That's amazing.
Yeah. So,
Right.
yeah.
Thank you so much.